everybody. So I would like to begin just by saying three quick things about the title slide here. So the first is a little bit about who we are. The Ensemble business unit is a software-only NFV-dedicated business unit within ADVA. And if you've been around in the industry for a while, you probably remember the Overture gang out making the message very early in the days of the industry. So this is really the Overture product and group. We acquired them, and they're alive and well living inside of ADVA. And if I could make a little advertising pitch, in fact, the Overture team arrived to us with the estimable Prayson Pate as its lead spokesman, and he's up for a Lifetime Achievement Award tonight, so if you have a vote, please vote for our man Prayson. The second thing I'd like to talk about is the edge. So Michael Howard actually put up a great slide yesterday talking about how ambiguous the term edge is. It can mean everything from sort of the right-hand side of the core data center all the way out to customer premise equipment. So from our point of view, what edge is about is really customer premise equipment predominantly, and we cheat a little bit into that first point of presence, that first data center, be it in a CO or whatever. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And the final thing is 2.0. So I was here last year delivering postcards from the Edge 1.0. So if you weren't here, shame on you. But don't worry, I'm going to recap it very briefly in the first couple slides, and then we'll get going with the update. So there was a great term that I heard coined yesterday by Buchanan called fake virtualization. So we'll talk a little bit around what was going on in the early days of uCPE out at the Edge. We all heard the starting gun, right? 6 years ago here at this conference, the white paper was dropped, everybody heard the gun go, and we all started off it. And we all had slides that looked roughly like this, saying, great, this stack of metal that you used to have is going to get collapsed into one server, and you're going to save a bunch of money because there's much less metal, and away you go. And it didn't quite turn out that way. So what we ended up with was sort of a hodgepodge of solutions. And the reason for that is fairly straightforward. Anybody who is offering layer 3 services of the type that are addressable by uCPE is a layer 3 player, and they have been talking to the dominant suppliers in that industry for years. Those are the first people who get a crack at convincing them they have a solution for uCPE. And what do? They look at it and say, well, we're not really interested in losing revenue. So what we'll do instead is take our solutions that have FPGAs or ASICs, we'll add some of our own middleware, we'll bolt an x86 on the side, and then we'll let 1 or 2 VNFs run on it, and we'll call it open. And that has been the MO of the major players in that part of the industry for some time now. And it doesn't work. And it doesn't match what we were all hoping for, which is something a lot more like this, where I, the operator, can go out and say, I want to run a competitive RFP for an x86 hardware provider. I want to see guys like Dell and Lanner and Advantech beat the crap out of each other trying to win my business and get nice low prices, just like they do in the data center. That's the game that I want to see. Then I need some middleware on top, ideally from a company like us, which serves to homologate, serves as a convergence layer, so that I'm not having to deal with the vagaries of drivers and port mappings and all the weirdness that comes from this or that piece of hardware, and it makes it simple for me. And then finally, and most importantly, I want to have a selection of VNFs on top. I want a big library. And this is essential, and I make this point over and over again when I'm talking to operators. Everybody knows SD-WAN is the killer app. This is the lead one that is getting people out into the market and driving new sales. If you as a service provider are going to the market with exactly one SD-WAN provider, you are not market viable. It is not possible to survive in the industry with only one SD-WAN solution. And the reason for that is all the SD-WAN players are highly convincing people. They're going out and talking directly to the CIOs, making their sale. And as you go around as a service provider knocking on the doors, you're going to come across guys who are sold on Versa, who are sold on Viptela, who are sold on Silver Peak, CloudGenix, the list goes on and on and on. The Gartner report has something like 35 vendors in this space. You need to have a flexible library. So therefore, having your SD-WAN solution as your hosting layer is not a market viable solution. It might stop the bleeding for the next 6 months, but it will not get you to the promised land. So in addition, of course, you need an open selection of firewalls. And then the most interesting bit is the stuff at the right-hand side. It's the etc. There's always something else that somebody wants to add. WAN acceleration is an easy one. But we see deals where people say, geez, I'm in retail, and I'd really like to add something that does management of my cash terminals, or something like that, right? Because they're just oddballs. So you end up doing a semi-custom one almost every time you're doing a major sale. So that is the goal. That is what we wanted to hit. And we've actually managed to do so. All right. So you're all caught up. Anybody who missed version 1.0, you saved 14 minutes of your life, and now we can get going ahead with version 2.0 of the market update. So this is primarily going to be about the market, and then just a little wee bit about technology at the end. 3 stories I want to hit here. First is enterprise demand is the thing. This is a big surprise to me, but the story that we all believed from the very beginning that this was about service provider cost savings is nonsense. It's about enterprise demand, and it is starting to play itself out very strongly in the market now. Secondly, the service provider cost savings argument has been won, and we'll go through that in some detail. Hopefully you'll find it convincing. And finally, most interestingly, is once the service providers have crossed the hump, once they've decided to make the change, they've operationalized uCPE, then they say, well, geez, now I've got this compute platform that can do a bunch of different things. What else am I going to use it for? And all kinds of interesting applications are coming up there. All right, so what is the premise behind saying that the service provider, or sorry, the enterprise demand is now the driver of the market? So first of all, uCPE has a clear and distinct value proposition for a CIO. Number one, they're not dummies. They know that if you deploy 500 appliances to their sites, or 1,000 or 2,000, however big they are, that is lock-in. You're going to have to be really, really angry with the service provided by that box to go through the pain of ripping out 500 or 1,000 of them. Much less angry than you'd have to be to turn in 500 licenses and get them to download a new application. So the barrier to exit is significantly lower for uCPE than it is for an appliance. And they know that. Everybody knows that. Second thing is, if I've got a stack of N boxes times M locations, the maintenance upgrades are murder. That's absolutely terrible. I've got a range of time. There's always a DRAM upgrade that needs to be added in order to support the latest feature, or a recall on this part, or a hardware upgrade of this or that. There's always somebody who wants to come in between midnight and 2 a.m. to my shops in the far corners of the world, and I have to arrange for somebody to be there, let them in, watch them do their job. It is a total pain in the butt for CIOs to be able to manage this on a stack of boxes. If you reduce it down to one box, you've reduced the problem by that much. So yes, there's still hardware there in the end, but if it's a one box, not 3 or 4, it's obviously a significant different proposition. And then the final thing that they're seeing is what I was hinting at just a second ago, is that if somebody is going to put a computer in all of my locations, they're going to be keeping it up to date, they're going to be managing it, they're going to be monitoring it. I've got a computer there. I can start to put some of my own applications on there. I can negotiate access to a couple of the cores and some of the RAM, and that crufty old Windows NT server that I had under the counter driving the LED sign saying that my Frito-Lays are on sale, I can now get rid of it, run it as a VM on a spare core there. Big savings for me, especially in terms of hassle, but also just in terms of electricity consumption, maintaining that thing, etc. So that's what the CIOs are seeing. How do we know this? So is it just a theory, or do we actually have some evidence? So we do, because we're seeing enterprises actively shopping deals. They're appearing to us, so we're in a fortunate situation now where we're actually selling through multiple different operators. And we see sometimes the same company appearing through multiple. And if you only see them through one, you think, well, maybe this channel's only selling what they have, on the shelf. But if you see them coming through 2 or 3, you think, okay, they're actually explicitly asking for uCPE, and such is the case. And the other that I think is perhaps most interesting and should send a shudder through service providers who aren't making the transition yet is that we're seeing these guys come to us now through SIs and through resellers. So think about that one for a sec. Every telecom service that has ever been done has always been subject to a buy versus build decision by the end enterprise. For a long time, people thought uCPE is just a managed service. There's no reason why that needs to be the case. They can buy a box from Lanner or from Dell or Advantech. They can slap some middleware on it, some licenses on it, and sell it as a package, and the end enterprise can simply own it. They don't have to purchase it as a service. And they would rather do that than purchase a stack. This is happening. This is happening now. Big global resellers are getting into this game to be able to offer this. And as Gail said when she was looking at the numbers for her SD-WAN market, the majority of SD-WAN sells through resellers, not through managed service. We expect the same thing to be happening in the uCPE world. So takeaway message, right, is not really about operator savings anymore. It's about end customer demand, which is obviously a very healthy state in the industry. Not to say that the operator savings aren't there. So that's the next big piece of news. So this discussion about PMO and FMO is really about present mode of operation and future mode of operation. It's really about getting over the hump, right? Of course, uCPE has to prove in against the present mode of operation. Nobody's going to make a big technology change to something that is more expensive, of course. So that's completely fair. But it's also a bit of a crutch for inaction, right? Somebody goes through, they do this nice Excel spreadsheet, we support them with that. Then they come back and say, oh, you know what, Juniper lowered the price on the SRX by $10. Let's run the whole thing again. And so we go through, and you get a lot of people just doing analysis paralysis. Honestly, I'm losing patience a little bit with discussions. We have seen operators win financially. They can say, I can see a financial win. These are operators in developing countries, operators with average bandwidths of the 10, 50 megabit range. You don't have to be in a rich country to see a win off this stuff. So in my view, this is a done deal. And anybody who's busy analyzing it and so on is really just trying to find an excuse not to do it. Also, it doesn't matter. And this is probably the most interesting thing in the discussion. So we go through these things and they beat us up. They beat us up for 4-core pricing. It's got to get down, the hardware's got to get down below $400, blah, blah, blah. And ADVA, your pricing, we got to squeeze you. And I say, okay, right? And so we just move some of the margin, because I got to pay my engineers, we move some of the margin from 4-core up to 8 and 16-core. And then what happens? They sign the deal, the CFO leaves the room, and a bunch of product managers look at this and say, hey, I like this. They look at it and they think, you know what, an extra core and an extra gig costs about $25, right? I amortize over about a 25-month period, that's $1 a month. I'm going to put an extra 2 cores or 4 cores on there with attracted memory, and I'm just going to upsell. I'm going to leave room to have that extra application for the enterprise. I'm going to leave room for an upsell to an extra feature on my firewall, et cetera. So that's simply what happens. So for all of you people who happen to be working in the purchasing department of telcos, please beat me up on 4-core. And we'll just move the money over to 8-core, and we'll have a nice, long, happy life together. So that the takeaway here, right, is uCPE is a cost win. It's within the margin of error of pricing policy. I've seen some truly extraordinary VNF pricing in accounts where they care to go make it. So if you're not getting pricing you want on the VNF from your current provider, go ask their competitor, and I think they'll come around pretty quickly. Point 3 is branching out. So once they have operationalized this, the operator starts saying, gee, this is pretty cool. It's a computer. It can kind of do anything. And of course, it can kind of do anything. And we see them taking us then into adjacent security applications. Lots of them have a practice of simply providing encryption. Into mobility applications. A great discussion last night at the Intel event about how there was really kind of a limited window for telcos to figure out how to operationalize virtualization prior to the arrival of 5G, which simply isn't commercially viable if you aren't virtualizing. So taking us into mobility is actually one of the earlier applications. And then the low market side. So this one's very interesting. I don't want to over-rotate on my notion that for the primary uCPE cell, that the pricing isn't really the critical matter. It isn't at the top of the market, but of course it is at the bottom of the market. If you're trying to displace a physical NID or a physical CPE router, that's a tough game. I mean, some of these guys have COGS down around $100. So it'll be a while before a uCPE solution can displace all of those. I'm not arguing that point. But it's coming, and it will come. And the dominant effect here is DRAM costs and CPU pricing. So it's been sort of well-worn statement now that Moore's law is dead. That could be true, but I think honestly Moore has just switched from technology into accounting, because the real action is in pricing policy. So two things that you're going to see. Obviously, ARM is becoming more credible as a supplier, and whether the market actually moves to ARM or ARM simply forces Intel to continue their slow march down in pricing doesn't really matter, right? We the industry benefit from the lower prices that way. The larger effect is DRAM. So as new DRAM suppliers come on market in the next 12 months, and as new technologies come to market, that will be the dominant effect on COGS. So if you want to look at anything that's going to predict your end costs for uCPE solutions, just watch the spot DRAM prices. That is the dominant effect. My personal theory is that there's about a 10x market opportunity change for every $100 of COGS we manage to squeeze out of the solution, heading down into the low end, till finally you get to the point where having purpose-built NIDs and CPE routers simply doesn't make any sense anymore. Okay, so those are the three big points I wanted to make about the market today. So begs the question, why does everybody keep saying it's hard? Very reputable, esteemed people like Axel Klauberg were standing up here yesterday morning talking about how hard it was. It's not hard. Right? There are people out there doing it today. People not as smart as Axel and the luminaries at Deutsche Telekom. I think it's a function of who you're listening to. If you're listening to guys who don't want you to change that to that model, they're probably going to tell you it's hard. So I think that is happening a lot. We have seen all of the usual incumbent suppliers doing their various hybrid solutions. The operators play with them for a while. It always ends in tears, and they end up coming back around to the competitive open market. So watch for it. And if you're going down that road, maybe it's time for some second thoughts. Second point is that don't believe it, right? I mean, it simply isn't as hard as things you have done already, right? The transition from circuit to packet, that was hard. That was really impressive. It took a long time, and that was really complicated. Radio, that's completely black art to me. I don't understand how that stuff works at all, and yet all of us carry our cell phones around and don't think anything of it, except when it doesn't work. Cloud is not hard. Every kid that you run into today has been spinning up VMs for years. My kids do it, and one of them is in grade 10. This is just fairly routine technology. And finally, services are available to support you, be it design services, build, operate, transfer services from vendors, from little consultants, from big global system integrators. It's all out there. And last thought I would leave with you is that this stuff isn't hard for the service provider leaders. So for guys like Colt, for guys like Verizon, who have taken the plunge and who are already out there, they're selling globally. They're selling in your territory. As well, if they can sell anywhere, so can Microsoft and AWS. You don't have to have been a traditional telco. So just like Gail was saying, the voice companies who sold as overlay in the previous round of technology, so too it's going to be non-traditional competitors who can come in and do absolutely everything that you do as a managed business service over the top. So careful with that one. They're coming. And they certainly do not find cloud hard. So get on it. But anyway, don't worry. If you're not offering it to your market, I guarantee you one of your competitors is, so your customers are well taken care of. Okay, one quick slide on technology. I keep on hearing this cloud native stuff, and geez, what do people mean when they say cloud native? And actually a penny dropped for me last night is that people are really starting to line that term up with containers. And that seems like a nice sort of use case definition of what cloud native ought to mean. And if that's what it means, I just want to tell you, it's here, guys. We've been doing this for years. It is not hard. So containers run in our solution now. We have VNFs, container VNFs, from third parties doing encryption, doing routing, doing service assurance from names that you would know. And that that is not hard. The trick about containers is that you no longer have isolation of operating systems. So their stuff is running in the same operating system as the base layer. That means they have to be running on the same kernel. It also means you have to work out driver conflicts and so on. So it is not a meet in the market thing. I can't go and schlep together 4 or 5 different VNFs from whomever, run them together and expect them to win. There are very popular VNFs out there that are running with a kernel that's over 10 years old. So it is a very viable meet in the lab topic, but it is not a meet in the market topic. Okay, so summary slide. This is pretty much the same slide as last year. So the operators that pass the questions, they win the boxes. These gray box solutions are net negatives in the end market. Round 2 is actively underway, right? The choice is essential. As I said many times, you are not viable in the market with only one SD-WAN offering. You will not win in the long term. Of course, you'll win some accounts, but you'll get beaten in the market generally. So having this layered open approach is absolutely paying off. And containers are a here and now topic. They're as here and now as they're going to get for uCPE. It's never going to be the case that arbitrary companies are going to have magically made the same Linux kernel decisions. So it is a topic where you can kind of say, these ones are really important. Let's arrange a lineup before we go to the market. That we can do. But adding them on the fly is really a topic for isolated operating systems. So that's a VM topic. And the really big news down here at the bottom is that enterprises are now driving the uCPE market. It's not about service provider sales. It's end enterprises with their demand, both upon multiple different service provider offers and as well now as a bot offering through resellers of various kinds. All right, that's it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next year.